Spain was, since the discovery of the New World, at the forefront of European politics. Under Charles I and Philippe II, Spain was the cultural, military and economic master of the Western world. Its empire stretched from California to Cape Horn, and the immense riches of the Americas flowed back to Madrid. Spain's Habsburg rulers, alongside their relatives who ran the Holy Roman Empire, dictated European politics for centuries. Yet, this came to an end and Spain was replaced as a global power by the Dutch, the French and the English. The question is, why did this happen and when was this process complete? At what point did Spain, the conquerors of a continent, lose the title of Europe's greatest power, and furthermore, when did it stop being a great power altogether? It was under Charles I and Philippe II that Spain's power in Europe was at its height. Yet it was during the later reign of Philippe II that things started to sour. The Spanish monarch was also known as the Catholic monarch and was dedicated to preserving and protecting the Church. Two things on this front forced Spain's attention. First was the Muslim Ottoman Empire to the south, whom Spain wanted to keep out of Europe, and this culminated in the 1571 Battle of Lepanto, which, to put it mildly, was expensive. The second challenge to it was the Protestant Reformation, which saw the Netherlands rebel against Spain and also brought Philippe's kingdom into conflict with the English. All of these things were quite expensive, not least the failure of the Spanish Armada, which basically bankrupted Spain. However, Philippe did manage to inherit Portugal and its empire too, which gave Spain a major boost. Philippe II died in 1598 and was succeeded by his son Philippe III, who would in 1618 bring Spain into the 30 Years' War against the Protestant powers of Europe and France. Spain actually performed quite well during the war, but it was extremely costly. Also, revolts broke out in Portugal and Catalonia, which saw Philippe IV in 1640 effectively lose control of the former. In 1648, at the end of the war, Spain acknowledged Dutch independence and thus lost access to the richest lands in Europe and also now had to deal with another rival at sea. In 1658, Spain was defeated by France, which effectively established Louis XIV as Europe's leading monarch and also saw Spain lose this land. It's at this point we can safely say that Spain was no longer the foremost power of Europe. Spain suffered more difficulties when the heavily disabled and heirless Charles II died in 1700. He had nominated Philippe of Anjou, the grandson of Louis XIV, as his heir. This was unacceptable to many of Europe's powers because it made Spain a permanent ally of France, and so, war. This war, the War of the Spanish Succession, ended with Philippe taking up the throne on the condition that Spain and France never unite, and also that Spain give all of these territories to the Austrian Habsburgs. And despite all of this, Spain was still a great power, just a diminished one. In the century following the War of Succession, the Spanish sought to reform their kingdom and the empire with it. These reforms were especially pronounced during the reign of Charles III, who opened the empire's trade to other nations and introduced a much more direct form of governance. It was Charles III's son, Charles IV, whose actions meant Spain would lose its status as a great power. He sided with Napoleon during the Napoleonic Wars, but was himself ousted from power in 1808 and succeeded by his son, Ferdinand VII. Napoleon wasn't okay with Ferdinand and so wanted his brother Joseph Napoleon made Spanish king. Civil war broke out, Napoleon invaded, Joseph was made king and France pinched Catalonia. Revolts against King Joseph broke out across Spanish America, and even after Napoleon had been defeated and Ferdinand restored, those who lived there felt that Spain could no longer provide wealth and security. Spain was essentially sidelined after the Napoleonic Wars, and in the decades following lost most of her American colonies to revolution. This was followed by yet more decades of near constant civil strife and conflict within Spain itself. It was thus at this point after the Napoleonic Wars that Spain was no longer considered a great power and would thereafter remain on the sidelines of European politics. I hope you enjoyed this episode and thank you for watching, with extra thanks to my patrons that you see on screen now. And a special thanks to James Bisonet, David Archaeologist, Azaka Flash, Party Boyko, Rob Waterhouse, Yashar N. Naman, Chris Wicker, Miles Bailey Brentgard, Michael Reynolds, Gustav Swan, Toonrick, Onion Duck, Maggie Paxkowski, Winston Kaywood, Vasily Aravidis, Anthony Beckett, Adam Harvey, Ike, Sky Chappelle and the Amusement Parchives.